Support for Stereophonic comes from AEA ribbon mics and preamps, crafting the world's finest ribbon microphones and preamps for the modern artist and engineer. To learn more, go to aearibbonmics.com. Ready to make hits at home? Now through December 31st, purchase and register any new Apollo Twin or Aero audio interface and get the iconic sounds heard on thousands of hit records with exclusive UAD plugins from Neve, Fender, Lexicon, and UA. Absolutely free. Find out more at universalaudio.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Stereophonic, a regular conversation series with tips and tales from deep inside the music industry. Thank you for rating and reviewing our podcast and for following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Now let's meet the host of Stereophonic, Dan Kimpel, and today's special guest.
2018 USA Fellow and five-time Grammy-winning composer, trumpeter, and recording artist Terence Blanchard is a national treasure. His score, recorded with his quintet E Collective and a full orchestra for the film BlackKkKlansman, bolsters the film's devastatingly timely message.
It's one of the things that I say is important for artists. We have to be naked on the bandstand. We have to be vulnerable. That's part of the job. Because in our healing ourselves, hopefully we'll touch some other souls to help them heal. And I think that's something that's extremely important to teach young people about the purpose of music.
His latest Blue Note release with the E Collective, titled Live, reveals bitter frustration with these times, juxtaposed with a healing emotional balm. Consciousness, conscience, and commitment. Listen as Terence Blanchard goes deep. The Stereophonic crew is on the road. We are in a bar, and not just any bar. We are in the bar of the world-famous Sunset Marquee, an esteemed rock hangout. Unfortunately, your waitress will not be around to take your drink order, Terence.
I was looking for her.
Oh, well, I think we're
I don't know where
close.
she went.
The occasion of our being here is the presence of five-time Grammy Award-winning USA Fellow, composer, musician, many things, Terence Blanchard. Hey, Terence.
Hey, man, how's it going?
Good. I was going to call you a film composer, but you compose across a lot of mediums. You do films, you do concert pieces, you do for obviously your band, and also for operas now, too. So, composer it is.
It's been a journey. I was just having this conversation the other day with somebody, and we were talking about labels. And the thing that I kept thinking about was, I don't know what the label would be for me, because I used to call myself a jazz musician.
Yes.
Because that's what I did primarily. But now, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to do a bunch of different things. You said opera. I'm working on my second one right now. I just had a concerto that was premiered in Miami with the Sphinx organization. I'm working on another piece for orchestra dealing with civil rights for Cleveland. The band just released an album earlier this year, and then I'm getting ready to work on another film. And I love teaching.
Yeah.
So
what do you do in your spare time?
What is that? I heard about this thing called spare time.
That's great.
I love sports, man. I love, I'm a sports guy, so I love watching football. I love basketball, and I box. I've been boxing for 20 years.
Don't hit me.
Oh, don't worry.
I haven't asked that question yet. Terence, one of the reasons you're very much in our focus right now is because of a film called BlackKkKlansman.
Yes.
That you scored, and I had occasion to see it. I even brought my notes so you could see what it looks like when I write in the dark. It's an amazingly devastating and timely film, even though it's in a historical period. It's very timely to right now.
It is, in sort of a sad way. I'm a product of the 70s, so I remember that period of our history. And I remember once Jimmy Carter was elected, I remember thinking that a lot of that nonsense was behind us, as a country. And then lo and behold, the Reagan years started slowly bringing all of that stuff back into the fray. And now it's grown until this thing where we're being led by a guy who's actually a symptom of all that. And it's frightening because this was literally the country that was developed so people could have the freedom to speak their mind and worship who they wanted to worship and be who they wanted to be. And we have a small but very loud contingency of folks who are trying to make decisions for all. And for people who don't believe as they do, they create a lot of problems and issues. And it's unfortunate, because that's not the greatest part of what this country has been built on.
Yeah. BlackKkKlansman brings that home very, very much at the end when we kind of think we're almost home free with the end of the story. And then suddenly we're seeing footage of Charlottesville and all of that. The musical points of reference from the film, the obvious thing is how melodic the score is, that it's themes, and then those themes are developed. We hear those themes in different ways. And they're beautiful themes, and they're very much get-in-your-head themes, too.
Thank you. Well, that's how Spike. When I first started working with him, first thing he said was, you ever run into that person that seemed like they had that conversation a million times, and you're the millionth guy that's come in? So it was that kind of thing, he said, listen, man, I don't like underscoring. And I went, okay, just by the way you say that, there will never be underscoring in any film that I work on with you, And he told me, he said, I really love melodic scores. And I want people to walk away from the theater humming the themes. I want people to, when they're thinking about the movie, they hum the melody, or vice versa. If the melody pops into their head, they want to immediately associate it with the film. And that's what we've been about for years. And with BlackKkKlansman, I look at it as being the culmination of how we've been working together for over 20 years. And it's a beautiful thing to see. I went to a screening of it last night and had the luxury of distance from it, because it's been a while since I worked on it, and I went to the premiere. So there's some things that I'd forgotten about that I'd scored. So I'm watching it as a patron. And the thing that hit me really hard last night was how Spike has really developed a very unique cinematic style, and how, as a composer, under his direction, we've developed this thing that is definitely a Spike Lee thing, and which is basically how the music takes on a narrative role in most of his films, and how the melodies themselves will cover, in an emotional way, scenes that could be really driven by rhythm, pulse, or energy in other ways. He shies against that. He really wants to have the emotional thing going on, even while some crazy stuff could be happening on screen. And it works to great effect for his style of movie. And it's one of the things I kept thinking about last night. I said, man, I don't think I could do this for anybody else. I don't know if it would work, because the way he puts things together, and working with Barry Alexander Brown over the years, it just seems like everything we've been doing has coalesced to this thing that has culminated in this project. And I'm very proud to be a part of it.
The very first thing we hear in BlackKkKlansman is sort of homage to the Old South, like Wish I Was in the Land of Cotton kind of vibe, which is an interesting setup for it, because it kind of lulls the viewer, as a film viewer, into thinking maybe you're going to see something other than what it is you see.
Right. And I think for him, it's laying the foundation for where all of this stuff is coming from, to let you know how long this has been a part of certain people, of an American culture. And then we have the Alec Baldwin scene right after. And what I tried to do there musically was really take some of the harmonic progressions of the Dixieland period and not be like real on the nose with it, but have those colors play underneath that scene to make reference to that period, because it's always a rough scene for me to watch for a few reasons. You know, when he uses the word mongrel in that scene and he points to this beautiful young African-American woman, it's a jarring thing for me being African-American, because I remember what that was, you know, because it's amazing how Baldwin's character and myself could look at that woman and see two different things, you know, because what I saw was an attention to detail, a sense of pride that, you know, African-American people have, to know that you are worthy of going to a school with anybody else, and the other idea of presenting yourself well, you know, to let people know that you're just as worthy as anybody else. And it's frustrating to see that, knowing all of the effort and energy that went into that, only for somebody just to dismiss it so frivolously as to say, mongrel. You know, so it's little things like that throughout the entire movie, man, that for me shook me to my core when I saw it the first time.
Yeah. A friend of mine, when I told him I had seen it, his take on it was he wasn't able to eat or drink or sleep for a period of time after the film. It's that shattering.
Yep.
Spike Lee's not a subtle filmmaker. I mean, we get, that's not what he does.
I think that's the first time I heard those two things in the same sentence. Spike and subtle.
And not what he does. Not what he does. But to tremendous effect.
But here's the thing about Spike. Spike is very subtle in some other ways, you know. I mean, he pays great attention to detail in terms of how it looks, you know, the lighting. Mm-hmm. You know, I've always said one of the beautiful things about Spike's movies is that you could hit it on pause at any given time, and damn near any frame will look like a painting or a photo, a perfectly placed photo, you know. So there's a lot of attention to detail there, and he does it so effortlessly. Mm-hmm. People kind of overlook it. They don't realize. Like with BlackKkKlansman, one of the things that I thought was like amazing is that the colors are not overhyped in the film. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It almost looks washed a little bit, which is a cinematic choice, and one that he used to great effect. It's beautiful, and I think it makes some other things like pop out later on in the film. You know, when we see the red Volkswagen and when we have the explosion, I think it makes those things bigger, you know, visually, because of what we're seeing earlier in the film.
I like the fashion. I like all the fashion choices in the film. I mean, you know, the leather and you know, the fros and just, you know, having come up in that era as well, you know, remembering that. You know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, listen, when the first scene when you see John David Washington walking to the scene, he's got the fro and the leather jacket, bro. I went right back to, I was like, oh my God, I remember being disappointed on the dance floor, getting turned down. You know, all of those types of things growing up as a kid, you know, and then being in R&B bands, being on the other side of the dance floor, being on the stage, creating the music for the dances, and going to football games, and just the daily struggles of being a teenager, along with the struggles of the societal things that were happening at the time, you know, that were more in your face. It's an interesting ride, you know, and I think the other part of it that's like really beautiful for me is the scene with Stokely Carmichael, and he starts to talk about our lips are full and our noses are broad, and we're beautiful. And Spike has the montages of those faces that pop up, you know, and that very monotone, that black and white is gorgeous. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of how, you know, Spike is brilliant at taking those words from that speech, but creating an image that really helps to make the point, you know, that he's talking about. And he does it in such a very artful and sophisticated way. I remember at the screening last night when that happened, and some of the faces would pop up, you could hear people respond like, just something simple, but you can tell it hit them. It's a powerful visual effect that he used.
I would assume that things begin with conversations with you and Spike. And what do those conversations sound like?
That's right. It's a podcast, so we're cool. No. I mean, they're very simple, man. I mean, the only reason why I laughed is because, one of the things I love about Spike, man, when, he has a very distinctive voice, but he always says your name and then his name when he calls you. You go, hello, he goes, Terence, Spike. And I go, like, there's anybody else with that voice in my life? Like, I didn't know who it was, But when we started talking about the film, we've been working together for a number of years. So, the conversation for this one was basically, he said, listen, I want an R&B band to be placed inside the score. And then he said, this is going to be Malcolm X all over again. He said, well, what haven't we featured? And I said, well, I'd like to use electric guitar, for this. And he said, cool. That was it.
Yeah.
And we went through our normal process of me creating, he gave me the script before he started shooting. And then once he started to edit, after he finished production, then I get the phone call of, are the juices flowing? Which means, send me some ideas. Yeah. And when I did that, after sitting down with the script and then one of the earlier cuts of the film, I just try to live with it and allow the film to talk to me and speak to me emotionally, and I'll just play and create these themes. I've gotten into the habit now with Spike, if I create one that I really love, I divorce myself away from it really quickly and then move on to the next thing, and then try to have the same type of emotional reaction even though the melodic content is different. And I'll create a bunch of those, and he only wants to hear them on the piano. Mm-hmm. And I'll send them to him, and he lives with them for a while. And I'm not sure, but I think he may take some of them and then play them up against pictures just to see how it feels for him. And then we'll have a spotting session. And in the spotting session, that's where he'll tell me, okay, well, hey, man, I think this one here should be this theme, and this one here should be that theme. And when we identify all of those things, and then we know where the music's going to go, we don't really talk until we get to the stage, and it's a powerful thing in life when somebody has that much confidence in you and gives you that much freedom. I'm the type of person, I respect that, a great deal, to the point where I'm never trying to take advantage of that or not understand the power of that, and never wanting to disappoint somebody who gives you that type of trust. So I work really hard at trying to create the initial melodic content, because the orchestration thing, it's just a matter of trying to shape what's happening on screen and put it all together, large narrative, which happens over the course of the film. And then Spike, he doesn't hear anything, man, until we get to the stage. And it's funny. I think he does it because he literally wants to feel the impact of the score the way the audience will for the first time. Yeah. So he's like, no, don't send me any demos. I don't want demos. No, it's okay. I'm waiting. I'm here at this stage. And, when we're tracking, we'll do a couple of takes, and he goes, you got it? And I go, yeah. And then we go, all right, play back. And then we'll let him sit at the control at the mixing desk. We give him two faders. One will for the dialogue and the other one for the music. And then he'll sit there and listen to it and have his reaction. And if he likes it, good. And then he moves on. That's it. Yeah.
So you're working with, we note that you're also the orchestrator, also the conductor. Mm-hmm. And we also, as noted, you have your band plus like 75-piece orchestra. That's That's really interesting.
It's a beautiful thing. It's it's one of those things now, I still don't take it for granted. I think every chance we get to do something like that, man, I look at it as a true blessing, because it's an amazing, awesome thing to have 70 musicians who are extremely talented, who are willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill your vision of what it is that you're trying to do. And it's a very heroic thing in my mind, because all of those guys in that orchestra are talented enough to have their own careers, But these guys are committed to this. I was making a joke about it earlier. I remember the first time I did a session out here in LA, man, I'm so used to it in New York where I said, okay, guys, I'm going to go listen to a playback. And I go in the control room by myself. Man, here, I remember the first time I was walking back to the control room, I let the door go, and there's like 3 or 4 dudes behind me, from the orchestra, because they want to come in and listen and make sure that things are right, So it's that attention to detail that helps make everything come together. So in a weird way, it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's a weird feeling like taking credit for the score, because there's so many people that are involved in making the thing work, because the notes are just notes on the page, but the interpretation, putting the life force in it, that's the thing that I can't do by myself. That's where you have great people who come along to help you shape your vision, and it makes a big difference.
You mentioned the electric guitar being featured so prominently, and yeah, absolutely. And then I read one description of the score, and it said it went from kind of being more slower, subtler, and later on the theme they said wacka wacka guitar and valiant horns, and I thought I liked that. I thought that was pretty wacka wacka guitar.
That's a new musical term.
I never.
I'm gonna have to write that on a score one day, man.
Wacka wacka
yeah,
guitar.
right here in bar 57, a wacka wacka guitar.
But I guess the thing is that instead of going for like strictly a period sound, something with flute or something like Curtis Mayfield reminiscent, you went a different direction with it.
Well, with like I said, going back to what I was talking about earlier, looking at the opening scene, seeing those afros, man, and the leather jackets and the bell bottoms and all of that stuff, I started thinking about Jimi Hendrix playing the national anthem.
Yeah.
And I remember, first of all, how radical that was to me, but radical in a way like that was very patriotic. To me, that was patriotism, because, by him playing the national anthem with that screaming, distorted guitar, he's telling you, we're Americans too. Women, people of color, all of the underrepresented groups, we're Americans too, who should be afforded all of the rights that everybody else has. And to me, that's what the film was speaking to. I think it's hard to put in the words, but that had to be the motivating drive behind a rookie cop getting involved and trying to infiltrate the Klan. Because think about it, he ran across an ad in the paper. Now, most African Americans who would see that would say, man, look at this. This is crazy. You see this? And pointed out, man, can you believe these dudes have an ad in the paper? And then it would be done at that, right?
Yeah.
Not this guy, who's a rookie. I have to keep emphasizing that.
Yeah.
No, he called them. He called them and wanted to see what was going on and devised a plan to infiltrate the Klan with a partner. And to me, that's true patriotism as well, heroism, integrity of the highest order. So the guitar for me represents that yearning to be like everybody else, because that had to be what Ron Stallworth was going through when he decided to do what he did. It's like, how dare these guys? Yeah. There's a few scenes in the movie, man, that really hit me for a lot of reasons, and it may fly by some people, but when he told his captain, I speak the Queen's English, I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a family of educators. Mm-hmm. So no matter what it was I did in the street, when I came home, my mom was like, hey, you don't speak like that? Mm-hmm. How do you pronounce that word? Or my favorite is like, hey, Mom, what does this word mean? Never gave me the answer. The answer was always, go look it up.
Yeah.
But his own captain approached him with a bias. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people have to go through. Mm-hmm. Not being considered as someone who could possibly have the same values or the same, attributes. We're seeing it today playing out in our government.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because all of those little things, if you're watching the film, they're little things. But those are the little things for some of us that are really big things. Really big things. And watching the film with that, coupled with some other things that are placed in the film, the comment about when his character says, oh, come on, America would never elect a president like a guy like that for president. Then there's a couple others, and then, there's the reference to when David Duke is saying, America first, and they start to chant America first. All of those things are setting you up for the montage at the end. Yeah. Because when we start to hear blood and soil, I don't know if people really get it yet because you don't see them. We just hear blood and soil. So I don't know if people get that it's current. I've been meaning to ask people that, and then when we start to see the footage of Charlottesville, it's a startling thing.
It's very jarring. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very. I think that because you almost feel like you're getting your shit together, going home. Kind of, okay, we're at the end of the film, and then all of a sudden you're not at the end. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
The wild part about it is that when you listen to those people screaming in the street, and the guy says, "We didn't want those motherfuckers here." If you would have changed the wardrobe, that could have been a scene in the movie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the sad part. And it's crazy to me because, man, when you get to the end of the montage and it has a still photo and then it goes to the photo of the flag, mm-hmm. you could hear a pin drop in the theater.
Yeah, you're right.
Because I think people are shaken to their core because for 2 hours, you're sitting here dealing with a period piece, mm-hmm. From the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I know for most people, the general idea is like, oh, that happened back then. And then this montage goes, no, but it's happening now. When I saw it for the first time with no music, it just shook me. And I went, oh, that's amazing. And then you hear the fine people comment. It's powerful.
Powerful. It's interesting that you referenced Jimi Hendrix because mm-hmm. on your live album, you mm-hmm. also referenced Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, it's fun. I hadn't put that together until you just said that, I love Jimi Hendrix. I thought Jimi Hendrix was a musical genius. In some ways, to me, man, Jimi Hendrix is like Louis Armstrong. Mm-hmm. These are two great musicians that had something to say. And their instruments weren't enough for them to utilize to say that. So they weren't professional singers, but they started to sing because the word itself had power. The power of love. Yeah. Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. And man, when you listen to some of his music, you forget it's three guys. You forget. You go, oh, that's crazy. And then you go back and you may pull up a video and you go, right, man, there's only three dudes playing that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he had such an influence on so many people back then. Ernie Isley and all of those guys, all of those guitarists. Everybody was influenced by him. Prince, you could tell Prince was a disciple of Jimi Hendrix. So, with the new band, with the E Collective, I got a chance to pay homage, pay tribute to him with Dear Jimmy, which is a tune that I'd written for him.
And it's interesting that the lead instrument that we first hear on that, I believe, is you on synthesizer, correct?
Yeah, because I wanted to take part in it. Some I had to say something at some point, and I didn't want to do it with the trumpet because I didn't want the Miles Davis, Jimi Hendrix reference. So I just decided to do it with the keyboard.
What do you use to make that trumpet sound so fat on that record?
It's a technique that if I told you, man, I couldn't.
You have to kill me?
Yeah. Worked on that for years.
I was interested. It was interesting because I was just really aware of how fat the sound of that
No,
was.
Thank you. No, it's an effects box that I use that generates harmonies. Mm-hmm. And I didn't use the harmonic portion of it on the live album. But what I do is I split up the octaves. I have one that will just play an octave below. Then I have another one that plays an octave below and an octave up. Mm-hmm. And then I have a third one that plays 2 octaves up and an octave below. So it's just a matter of trying to use different colors, man. Mm-hmm. I remember in the 80s, some of the older jazz musicians were a little not afraid, I shouldn't say that, they weren't afraid. But they didn't want to use electronic instruments because the thing was they thought that, people were trying to replace mm-hmm. stuff. And I don't look at it like that. For me, I look at it as like it's an added tool. It's another color. It's something else to be utilized to make a musical statement. So why not? I understand the tradition of being totally acoustic, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have no problems with that. But all of us are not going to be the same, and that's the thing that I love. As a group that hopefully I get a chance to work with, we were working on a project once before Kronos String Quartet. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I love about them, man, it's a string quartet, right? But they'll use the digital applications to add effects to their instruments and given parts of a piece. And they do it in such a brilliant way because there's a program called Live that they use. If you know that you want to have certain effects on the strings at a certain point in the piece, then, they set that up at that point in Live and have all of these other various things. So the engineer, when they're performing, he's watching the score and he's clicking all these things and the effects change. Mm. So you could put an octave below on the cello and you could put delay on the violins doing pizzicato at a certain point, and then you could reverse it if you want. You can put other type of tonal effects on the strings, and put more lavish reverb, on the lower strings, if they want to play low and get that very ominous kind of sound. And it's brilliantly done, a great effect. And it hasn't taken away from their artistry. Mm-hmm. I think it's just another tool that you can utilize to create something that's a little unique.
Recording a live album, I know it's a whole different process, mm-hmm. clearly. And you also chose certain physical locations purposely to record in. Can you tell us why you chose those locations?
Well, the first album that we had done, I originally put the band together to influence some young kids who wanted to play music and didn't want to play jazz. I wanted them to at least think about playing their instruments on a high level. Mm-hmm. But, real life was happening at the time, so we decided to make all of the music as a tribute or in support of I Can't Breathe and Black Lives Matter campaign. And with Live, we were trying to continue the discussion about gun violence in our country. And we decided to go to 3 cities where we have had tragic events. And we wanted to have some civic engagement in those areas because the thing that we have been saying is that, we wanted the music to absorb your anger and frustration and hopefully heal some souls. So we went to Dallas where the cops were slaughtered. We went to Minneapolis where Philando Castile was shot. We went to Cleveland where Tamir Rice was shot. And it was really interesting, man, because in Minneapolis I got a chance to work with this group called the Ujamaa Men, which is a group that's dedicated to really helping young men who have been in the penal system, come out and really having meaningful and productive lives. And they do a lot of great work, man. They have like a 95% success rate. They educate these guys, they clothe them, they feed them, mm-hmm. and they give them therapy, and I was there one day right around the time they were doing a music therapy class. And I got a chance to speak to him. Man, and it was so powerful because there's one little kid, he was in his early 20s, and he was talking about how he would be in solitary confinement for 20 hours a day, and he would come out for maybe an hour or two and then had to go back in. And then he started talking about how during that period, he became a rapper. It was interesting because he then subsequently told me that, well, okay, I can't do what I did before. And I'm like, why? I knew why. I was trying to get him to see. Because he was starting to talk about how, the early forms of his rap was very lewd. Mm-hmm. And now he says, man, I have a little cousin now and blah, blah, and so I can't do those things. And I go, why? I kept asking him why. He didn't get it. And I said, because you're growing. You got to recognize it. You got to recognize that you're evolving. It was a beautiful thing to sit down and hang with those guys for a minute, to see people who are in service of others. Because they have law enforcement people there, they have therapists, they have all different types of people working for this group, man. And everybody was very beautiful, and it was great. We went to Dallas. We had done some panel discussions about gun violence, man. And those were really, really powerful because I was shocked, at the number of people who came because it wasn't on the day of the performance. And I was also shocked at the questions, the very deep conversations that we were having, because you can see that this thing has affected a lot of people. They came ready to really have powerful discussions. And the panel was filled with artists. I was an international artist, but they had a lot of local artists there from different disciplines. And we were all talking about how all of this stuff has been affecting our art and how the art itself hopefully will have an effect on the community. That was beautiful. And then in Cleveland, man, we had some young folks come by, bring their cameras. We allowed them to record, sound check, and rehearsals, and let them edit, and just have them around us to see us as artists and see us in the process of our production on a professional level. But I got to tell you, man, we had something happen in Cleveland that was probably one of the most powerful things that happened to me, because after the show, I put together this electric band, the E Collective. So when we first started touring with the band, man, I had a lot of fans who would come up to me and say, "Oh man, I really miss the jazz band. When are you going to do that again? That kind of thing." Mm-hmm. So, after the show, there was a gentleman that walked up to me, and he was a little older than me. And I said, "Uh-oh, this is going to be one of those discussions." I said, "Let me brace myself for this." And he started out by saying, he said, "Man, I thought you were going to play A Tale of God's Will." Yeah. I said, "See, here we go." And he said, "When you started playing this music, you just sounded so angry." He said, "It sounded angry." And then he said, "But then you told us what the music was about." And then he said, "My next thought was, well, if the guy who created A Tale of God's Will is this angry, I got to rethink my position on gun control." And that was a powerful moment for me. Because sometimes, man, you get in this business, we all have lofty ideas of affecting hearts and minds. But when you actually see it and you actually experience it, it's a powerful moment. And it starts to make you realize the responsibility you have as an artist not to take any of this for granted.
You're an educator also. So Are these some of the things that you talk about or that you illuminate?
All the time.
Yeah.
Because for me, one of the things about education, we can always teach people, well, he did this, this is when it happened, this is what happened in history, and this is how it was structured. We always teach the fundamental things and the history of things. Mm-hmm. What's hard to teach is why they did it, why that person had a burning desire, because all of our intentions are different, which is what's supposed to happen in this universe. It's how the universe expands, right? So my thing is to always take my students and give them the tools to allow them to develop their ideas. If the student needs to learn how to write a blues or to write a bossa nova, I'm not that guy, and there are teachers that are really great at that. And I think that's also important in your education because that deals with learning the history of our music. I'm the guy that wants you to dig deep in your soul, and those ideas that you think aren't worth anything, they all have a tremendous value. And I want to show you how to take those ideas and blow that kernel up into something bigger. And understand that if you are honest with yourself, more than likely that music will touch somebody. But if you are creating it just because, that's generally what it sounds like. Yeah. I had a student, and she is extremely talented, and I noticed when she would have the writing assignments, man, she would always write about other stuff. It was never her. And I called her on it one day. I said, "Well, wait a minute." I'm like, "I know you have things in your life that you've experienced." And she was having trouble in a relationship with her mother, and there was some tough issues that they were tackling. And I remember the first time she wrote a piece about it, she brought it in. The piece was actually gorgeous, by the way. She couldn't get through it without crying. But you can tell that it was cathartic, and that moment was a moment that switched her as an artist. It set her down a path of healing as opposed of constant suffering because she's not dealing with the issue. And it's one of the things that I say is important for artists. We have to be naked on the bandstand. We have to be vulnerable. That's part of the job. Because in our healing ourselves, hopefully we'll touch some other souls to help them heal. And I think that's something that's extremely important to teach young people. about the purpose of music. You know, it's okay. You can play fast, you can play high, you can play giant steps. Okay, that's great. But, you know, Alvin Baptiste, who was a great educator in Louisiana, he told me, he said, listen, man, the easiest thing to do is to play like John Coltrane because you know everybody loves John Coltrane.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing to do is to stick your neck out and put your soul on the line, which could possibly be rejected. It's a frightful thing for a lot of us to face that. Well, but the thing about it is if you're really honest, you won't be rejected. You'll be embraced because somebody will be touched and it will have an effect on them. And I think that's what art should do.
I saw an article in the LA Times this morning, and it said, it was talking about football, and it said that the majority of concussions occur on kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I was thinking of you because I believe I had read that football was something that, that you wanted to do, right?
Yeah, I played Little League football, man, and I was actually pretty good at it. I got selected to the All-City team. And I was excited about it, man. I was like, oh, my God, I'm on my way, you know. Forget that I'm 5'10". When you're a kid, you don't realize that, man, you know.
Yeah.
So here it is. I think I'm on my way. And back then, in the 70s, my dad was watching PBS. And some story came on about football and concussions, right, back then. And my dad put a halt to my NFL aspirations right then and there. He just said, nope. You're not doing that anymore. So I never got a chance to be part of the All-City Saints, you know, which broke my heart. I was really looking forward to it. Until a few years later, when I was in high school in the marching band, we go to play for the Bayou Classic in New Orleans, the Southern University against Grambling. And for some reason, man, we're standing right outside the Superdome getting ready to go in. And for some reason, Grambling's football team showed up dressed on the bus. I don't know why. It was just bizarre. I'm like, why are they in uniform on the bus? And we're standing right outside of that bus, man. And when them big old dudes came out of that bus with those uniforms on, I started pressing my value. I said, yeah, let me go over here and warm up. I was like, yeah, thank you, Dad. Woo. Yeah, I didn't want none of them big old dudes chasing me. No, sirree. Yeah. It happened to me again one time, man. They wanted me to play the national anthem for the Saints. So I'm standing on the sidelines, man. And now your New Orleans Saints. And them dudes come running, and they came running right to the sideline. And I'm like, whoa. And they're screaming at the top of their lungs. I'm like, hey, watch out now. Oh, man, that was something else. I'm like, woo, yeah, I don't think that would have been for me. Yeah. It was a lofty idea when I was a kid. But the reality of them dudes, oh, no.
Big dudes.
Oh, my God.
I can't even imagine what it must have been like to grow up in a city like New Orleans, where the music is just in the air, and not just one kind of music, every kind of music, that melting pot of music.
You know what it's like? When you're growing up there, you don't know any better. Yeah. So when you first start to travel, you go, man, this place is kind of boring. That's what it's like. You know what I mean? It's like, well, where do we... what do you mean y'all don't really? That was what happened to me when I moved to New Brunswick, New Jersey. Yeah. When I went to Rutgers University. Yeah. It really makes you appreciate what that town has offered the world over generations. It's a true melting pot. I look at it as the example of what the American promise is supposed to be. You have all of these cultures coming together to create this unique thing. I don't speak French, but there's so many French words that are part of my vernacular just because of all of those things coming together. Seeing some guys who I didn't understand, probably I grew up with, were probably Native American. Yeah. You know, I just thought they were different types of African Americans. Mm-hmm. A lot of things like that. Starting to realize how major Spanish architecture played a role in the development of the French Quarter. But to us, when you're a kid, all of that stuff is just New Orleans. Yeah. But when you get older and you start to travel, and I started going to Europe, you start to say, wait a minute, oh, okay, now I see where this comes. You go to the south of France, where the architecture is kind of Spanish. And you go, oh, you start to piece all of these things together. And couple that with that happening artistically, with the music and painting, and not just jazz. New Orleans was one of the first towns to have an opera house, I'm told. You know, they used to travel back and forth between Havana and New Orleans. That was one of the circuits. It's a beautiful thing to witness because sometimes you can go in some of those buildings, some of those homes. I used to live in one. I lived in two, actually. The homes are so old, you feel the walls speaking of that history. It was so bizarre. My first home that I bought in New Orleans, I don't know how to explain it. I wish I had a picture to show you. Well, when you walked up the steps, at the top of the steps was a doorway. And the doorway had a balcony that went to another doorway. And if you made a sharp left, that was the rest of the house on the second floor. But the door to the balcony was right next to the door to the bedroom, which was the ensuite for me and my wife. Total bath and everything like that. Well, this guy who was a historian had come by and he made us realize, he said, "You're sleeping in the slave quarters." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "Look, let me show you." So the house had 8 fireplaces. And it never dawned on me that in my bedroom, there was no crown molding in the ceiling. And there's a fireplace, but it was it was very plain fireplace with no ornaments on it or anything. But right outside of there, that's where the crown molding was and all of the very decorative designs on all of the fireplaces were. And that door, that from the balcony, that's where the slaves entered the main house. It's so, to have all of that history, still at your fingertips. It's a unique thing to experience in New Orleans, I think.
The musical points of reference are just so encompassing, as you noted, from jazz, that the pop records, the rock records, the pop records that came out of New Orleans always had a weird thing, like the Lee Dorsey thing. There was always something really kind of askew about them that made them pop.
Well, think about it. It even goes to the Louis Armstrong. Think about Louis Armstrong. You would hear that accent. I hear that accent, I go, see, that's New Orleans right away. What a wonderful world. You know what I mean? It's almost like world. Yeah. And when I heard it, I go, that's my homie. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that went across all musical genres in New Orleans. So those pop records, all of those R&B things that were done on it. And then you had Professor Longhair, you had all of those guys creating their music. The thing that I loved about it, man, is like when you listen to all of those guys, Professor Longhair is the one that's coming to my mind right now. They were great musicians who appreciated everything that happened in the world of music, but they would say, okay, that's cool, but this is what I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that because there's still guys in New Orleans that are like that to this day, and they have something to say. They have something very unique to say. Look at that band, The Dirty Dozen.
Oh.
And one of the things I dig about that is that they're trumpet players and brass players in that band that one of them I studied with. He taught me when I was a kid, Gregory Davis. So they could have chosen to go down any other route, like the traditional route, like, Wynn and myself, they're going to move to New York and all of that stuff. Those guys said, no, man, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. And not only developed a career, but gave us great music in the process. That's one of the things I love about New Orleans. That's why I was happy to move back to New Orleans after living in New York for 15 years. When I moved back to New Orleans, it brought me back to why I did this, why I wanted to be a musician, because I love music. Some people get it twisted. They follow the stardom dream, and that becomes their focus. Well, a lot of the guys that I grew up with, no, that wasn't the focus. The focus was, man, I love playing. I'm having fun playing this music. I don't care where I'm playing either. This is who I am. And I love that. I love that. I love that about the folks down in New Orleans. I love that about some musicians down there. There are certain guys that I would go and hear. I don't expect them to be anything else. Yeah. Because when I go and hear them play, one of the things that I know is that they're not lying to people. They're not. They're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes or anything like that. they're saying, hey, man, you came in here for this ride? I hope you enjoy it because we about to have some fun. Now, if you don't have no fun, shame on you. But but we about to throw down.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. We had a guest, Terence, named Miriam Cutler, who specializes in music for documentary films and very much films of conscious.
Okay.
And she was talking about earlier in her career as a female composer that they had an organization meeting for women composers, and it was a very small meeting, and now it could be a very large meeting. I think if we were going to have a meeting of African American composers, we could probably meet in the Prius.
Yeah, it would still be a small meeting.
It's a small meeting. I'm thinking you, Stanley,
and Marcus,
Stephen James Taylor.
Yeah. Marcus, we were hanging out one day, and Marcus made a joke about it. He said, hey, man, we can't hang out in the same room. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, man, if they blow this place up, there go 2/3 of the African-American film composers in Hollywood. So you need to leave the building. I was like, why? I got to leave. And it's true. And I ran into a young man last night. He's actually trying to start a group of African-American film composers because, it is important. I kind of think it's a rough thing to talk about, but I kind of think like not only composers, but other aspects of people in this business who are African American. We're kind of like, black doctors. There was in the 70s when, people started to see African American doctors in major hospitals. Even though those people were really qualified, people were accustomed to seeing something else. Because even now, man, I still have had people ask me if I could write for orchestra. Yeah, I mean, it still happens every now. It doesn't happen as much, but it still happens every now and then. It's truly frustrating. I've heard some of the most ludicrous reasons why people wouldn't hire me, and it has nothing to do with your talent, and that part of it's rough. But the thing about this business is it's not something that just happens to me. It happens to women. It happens to other people of color, Latino folks, all different type of people. Because, man, people come to anything with biases. The most important thing is to recognize those, We all have them. We all do, My kids call me on the carpet for stuff, and I try to look at myself as being the most liberal thinking person on the planet, man. I can't even remember what I said. I said something, man, and my daughter said, Daddy, that ain't cool. and I was like, but wait a minute, I didn't mean it like that. And no, this is me. And she goes, yeah, but that wasn't cool. Whenever I have things like that happen with my kids, it's a reminder to me, we all have these things. It's important for us to recognize it. The problem is not having the bias. That's not the problem at all. The problem is allowing the bias not to allow you to grow. That's the problem, I think. You see what's going on in Washington right now. It's incredible. It's incredible to see so many people turning back the hands of time the way they're treating this woman and these allegations. It's amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch because it's almost as if people are forgetting that there's a big world out there and they're speaking to a specific group of people. And that, to me, has never been what this country is about, ever. Even George Bush went to a mosque, right? And I wasn't a George Bush supporter, but as a human being, even he understood, the need for restraint and to be open in your thinking and your response to things and to be responsible. Now, was he my favorite president? No. But just as a human being, I give him a lot of credit for that. Right now, some of the things that were said, some of the things that were said to Judge Sotomayor when she was being considered for the court, it's amazing to think that people still think that way these days, because there's so much information out there. There's been so much dialogue about these issues. Where are these people existing? What rock are they existing under? And how are they allowed to exist in such an isolated world? Because the truth of the matter is that growth is painful for everybody. Everybody. You know what I mean? There are things that I miss from my childhood, you know, but those days are gone. Yeah. And we have to accept the fact that we're constantly moving forward. My trumpet teacher used to always tell me something. He says, man, you're never standing still in this world, because while you think you're standing still, the rest of the world is moving forward. So when you think you're standing still, you're actually moving backward. And I think that's what has happened to a lot of folks. They haven't woken up to the fact that they were moving backwards. They still think that they're trying to uphold something that really doesn't exist anymore. But the thing that I have faith in this country is the fact that the majority of the people in this country know better. The problem with the majority is to get them out to vote. Yeah. That's the thing. But the majority of us know. That's why all of these guys fight for these voter right laws in all of these different districts, because they know if there were large turnouts in those areas, you know, it'll be a different story. Well, actually, listen, she got 3 million more votes anyway. So that's a whole nother topic too.
Gotcha.
That's a different podcast.
I guess so. We got a couple stereophonic questions, if you would be so kind. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know that you worked in a concerts format. We know you were done operas. Obviously, you do film and you do records. Is there a medium that you've not yet worked in that you would like to work, you know, in terms of your music?
Wow, that's a very good question. I haven't done dance yet. Dance kind of scares me, though. Well, opera scared me, so. But the things that I have been involved in, they've been so illuminating. Man, they've broadened my view of what music is. If the music has something to offer, people respond, and I don't care what it is.
If you didn't do music, is there something else that you would have a different kind of vocation? What would that be?
Probably be in sports, some kind of way. I mean, maybe not as an athlete, but, you know, I've been in boxing for like over 20 years. One of the things that I love about the sport is the chess match that happens that most people don't really realize. And so that chess match in sports is the thing that I really love. Most people look at the physical attributes that most athletes will have, and they kind of marvel at that, because that's also amazing too. But it's not just the physical, it's also the mental thing that attracts me to sports. And it's very similar to music. It's very similar to jazz. It's about being creative. It's about, once you learn your technique, then how do you utilize that to gain advantage over your opponent? Those are the things that I love about sports.
Terence Blanchard, what we love about you is everything that you share with us on Stereophonic.
Oh, man, thank you. It's been great being here.
Keep making it, man.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Don't have a choice.
This episode of Stereophonic was produced and edited by Lindsay Tomasic.
The music in this podcast is used by permission from Frameworks Music, Los Angeles, Ear Parade Music, Los Angeles, and our theme music was created by Dusty Gray. The music featured in this podcast by Terence Blanchard is used by permission. We'd like to thank our sponsors, AEA Ribbon Mics and Preamps, Universal Audio, Blue Designs, and Fender Guitars. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you back to hear another episode of Stereophonic.